Hello everyone and welcome on board the Sunrise Safari. As you can tell from the weather we're experiencing, probably not going to see the sunrise, and just like yesterday afternoon, this rainy drizzly weather is still around. It pitted and pattered throughout the evening, and we're actually really fortunate that it's dry for now. When I woke up and walked outside my room this morning, the drizzle was very thick, but thankfully it has subsided and we have both headed out in terms of myself, Scott, and teamed up with Andrew, as well as Jamie teamed up with VM, and we've both headed into the southern reaches of Djuma to follow up on any sign of possibly the Birmingham boys coming back onto the property. She's working the eastern parts and I'm working the western parts of the southern portions. It's a crisp morning, about 16 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but certainly looking forward to the adventure. And the crisp, cool weather is good for a lot of the animals as it allows them to keep moving into the daylight, especially the predators. So without any further ado, let's continue on this live safari. And if it is your first one, it's good to have you with us. And it's important that you know that we can communicate with you and interact. And if you'd like to send any questions or comments through to us, all you have to do is hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or send an email through to questions@wildearth.tv. And we really do love interacting with you and knowing a little bit more about where you are and what's going on where you are, so feel free to squeeze that info in on your questions. We've got Nikki and Jess in the final control room, and they have a tricky job in there. They have to decide which vehicle to cross to depending on where the action is, and also monitor all the signal strengths and a number of technical devices that I'm not too savvy with, but that's where they are, and they're a pivotal part of this team this morning. And Donna's just made a great comment, and she was obviously tuned in to the rugby last night. And for those of you who don't know, rugby is a hugely important sport in South Africa, and it was the start of the World Cup for our team yesterday, and I think it was the first time we've ever played Japan, who are not notoriously a very good rugby team, and we lost, which was a massive upset, and a lot of South Africans will be incredibly sad about that score, but let's hope that the team can put it back together. And Donna, thanks for your humor on this topic. And if any of you are supporting your national team, I wish you guys all the best in the World Cup. It's a great event, and let's hope that we get lots of entertainment out of it. As you can see, Andrew has to wipe the lens every now and then, and that's because as we drive, this gentle drizzle does cloud up the screen. But we've got off to a great start and found an animal that we don't see too often. And for now I can just see the one. You can see it just dotted off there in the distance, and Andrew's going to take you in for a closer look. Now, as much as the rain may hamper our ability to take you guys out on safari, it makes for incredibly crisp and clean conditions. And look at the beautiful colors we're seeing, these fresh green buds that the giraffe is nibbling on. And I've just spotted another giraffe off to our left, and it's in a much better spot, so we're going to swivel you across there. But while we do that, I can answer a question from Rudy in California, and he would like to know a local name. He would like to understand a little bit more about the local language here, and what a better opportunity than to give you the local name for a giraffe, and it's called a dlulamiti. And I think that means to eat the trees is the direct translation. A miti is a tree, and dlula might mean as tall as or to eat, but the local name of the giraffe is the dlulamiti. So there we go, Rudy. And another local word that I guess is also applicable this morning is good morning. And good morning in the local language, which is Shangaan or Tsonga, both synonymous for the same tribe, is avusheni, spelled A-V-U-X-E-N-I. So the X's are pronounced as sh. So avshen means good morning. Take a look at the dlulamiti though. It's just off to our left, and it's a beautiful big madoda, meaning a big male. And really good to have you with us. It's also good to have Lily on board, and Lily just asked us to clear up the difference between a guide and a ranger, as I'm told she got a little bit of abuse for calling Ryan a guide yesterday on Twitter or Facebook. And Lily, I hope everything's well in California, and the good news is that I can assure you that you are actually more correct by calling Ryan a guide than a ranger. The words both can be used synonymously. However, rangers are technically the people who work in the field to protect the animals against poachers or work for any wilderness area, but technically don't deal with the guests. They don't necessarily guide anyone through this experience. They merely work in a conservation area. And I think many years ago guides were more commonly referred to as rangers, but as the industry has transformed and progressed, the more applicable word for somebody driving guests around is a field guide. But you shouldn't get into trouble for using either, and whoever did give you a hard time was technically wrong. So I hope everyone is on the same page now. Rangers are people who work out in the field but don't necessarily take guests out, but guides are the ones who are technically the same as what we're doing, taking a bunch of people out on a safari. The drizzle is intensifying, and you've probably noticed a change in scenery. The view we gave you out to the east this morning indicated that the raining drizzle was a little bit further away, but it's made its way towards us, and we are kind of encompassed by a thick drizzle at the moment. And as Andrew zooms out, you'll hopefully be able to get an idea. It's difficult conditions for you to understand exactly how misty it is. Andrew's working his magic there on the camera. Very gentle breeze blowing. And the problem is while we're stationary like this, we can kind of get away with the filming, but as soon as we start driving, the drizzle gets exaggerated and covers everything in a layer of moisture. A good example of this is I'll put my binoculars onto the dashboard, and you'll see how much moisture is collected here. And the binoculars are actually down in between my driver's seats and the passenger seats, and even there it's getting covered in this layer of film. So things are not looking promising for this safari to continue. I was so hopeful that the drizzle was going to stay at bay, but with all of this equipment we cannot risk anything breaking. and Jamie and Wiem have already headed back towards camp, and we are probably going to start winding our way back there as well. Certainly not what we wanted. And Linda in Ohio is also on board with us this morning, and she's interested to know if giraffe will ever vocalize. And it's a good question, because no, they technically are a silent animal, although they do have the ability to make a noise. I've heard the odd strange grunt from a giraffe, but it's not communicatory, so they will not communicate with one another by any vocalizations, nor will they alarm call at anything. So essentially it's a silent animal, but they do have the ability to make some strange noises every now and then. But probably in my whole career I've only heard these strange grunting noises a handful of times. What a pity about this weather. Andrew's now attempting to drape a blanket over him and the camera to keep it dry, which looks hilarious. Almost worth a photo quickly that I can screenshot and show you guys later. Oh, there we go. Andrew, is there any chance you can zoom in on that to get an idea of where you are? There's Andrew, covered up with a blankie. And I'm going to take a couple of photos. Oh no, I'm on video. There we go. Sorry, Andrew. I'll whip the camera out very quickly. So, like I said, things aren't looking promising for the morning safari, guys, but we may see something interesting on the way back. But it's not worth risking any future safaris with you guys just to force the issue this morning. Well, thank you very, very much to Virginia and Kentucky, who's just provided us with some really interesting information, and that is that she's read an article saying that giraffe can communicate through humming, and I certainly haven't heard that. It'll be interesting to know if that is in fact the case, and it certainly could be. So I'm going to have to also do some research, and if any of you know more on the topic of giraffes humming, please feel free to share that with us. But that is a first for me. And like I say, thank you very, very much for sharing that fact with us, Virginia, because there's so much in terms of knowledge that one would need to know everything about this area, and I'm certainly way off from that, and all of your help really does make us fill the pieces of this puzzle a little bit more easily. Eddie Abbey would like to know how old were the giraffe that we've just had a brief look at, and they look both to be young males coming into their prime, so I'd put them at somewhere around 5 to 6 years of age. Not quite fully grown males, they were almost there, but coming into their prime. But on the topic of aging animals, Eddie Abbey, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do with accuracy, unless they're lions or leopards, which we monitor closely and often know quite accurately when they are born. The other general game like giraffe and elephant and buffalo, it would be very, very difficult to keep tabs on them as closely as we do the highly territorial predators, who are also less common. So whenever we give you these ages, it's essentially a thumb suck. I'm so disappointed about this weather, guys. I felt so hopeful that when we came out earlier on, it seemed like the drizzle was far enough away, but this weather has essentially been, you know, for 24 hours on and off this drizzle, and it makes our job impossible without risking some seriously technical equipment getting damaged, and we would hate that to happen. Not too sure what the weatherman's forecasts are for the rest of the day, but let's hope that it is going to clear up. Sadly, our local weatherman Brian, one of the cameramen, is on leave, but maybe we can phone him for some insight onto the matter. He is by far the most accurate at predicting the rain and the bad weather, and he's our go-to guy for that. Okay, well, a lot of you are asking for us to head off to a dry area and answer some questions and chat with you guys, and Jamie is one step ahead of you and is ready and waiting to receive you, so we will be able to do that for a short period. And if it doesn't clear enough to head out, then we'll call it a day. So without any further ado, over to Jamie, and we will see you shortly under the carport.
Good morning, everyone, and as you can see, unfortunately we are feeling a little bit damp and soggy out here on Djuma. VM and I have made a quick escape back to DRC. Unfortunately, Scott still has some rain driving to do, but we are both absolutely soaking. We've both had a cold shower to start our Sunday morning, but it has been a very, very interesting time. Unfortunately, with all of the electronics in the vehicles, we just simply cannot risk anything getting damaged, especially so soon with the build-up to Nat Geo coming to our side. It's very chilly, and it's frustrating to know that we can't be out there looking for animals to show you, but we do have plenty to talk about. And just while I'm thinking about things we have to talk about, we've had this incredible week where we've seen Kwetile mating with Tingana, all the way starting on Arathusa and then coming across to Djuma and mating quite frequently, almost abnormally frequently. And she's only been, as far as we know, she's only been mating with Tingana during this time. She's come right into the center of Karula's territory. I don't think Karula's terribly impressed by it. But we had a question from Campbell Cat, who wanted to know, he thought, or she thought, that leopards mated with the dominant male within their territory. So why is it that Kwetile has moved with Tingana as he's moved around? Now, it's an interesting question. They do mate within their territory, but bear in mind that their territory may overlap with a lot of different dominant male leopards. And I think in this case, she's just staying with Tingana whilst he is out and about patrolling his territorial boundaries. So his territory covers her territory as well as Karula's territory, and all around that sort of general area, including Shadow's territory as well. And whilst he's been patrolling, they've been following along behind and just staying with him. I think she just hasn't had any further access to any other males. Whereas a couple of weeks ago with Shadow, she was originally mating with Tingana, but then immediately moved off and started mating with the Anderson male, who was obviously close enough that she heard his calls or he heard hers, and she decided to move across to him. So I think it really, for the females, it really just depends on who is around and what is happening. So I do hope that answers your question. Is seriously still drizzling out here. I'm really hoping that it's going to clear up at some point so that we can get out and about and show you things. So far this morning, the wildebeest and I only really caught up with a couple of 2 miserable looking hardy-dar ibises and some rather damp looking franklins and 1 scruffy looking starling. So the birds are out and about, but they are not really enjoying this terribly much. I'm still trying to wipe water out of my eyes. But definitely still a nice way, and it's so necessary from our side that we do have this rain and what's happening here. I can hear Scott approaching, I think. He is on his way. Let's just see if he's coming through the side. Here he comes, making his way in. Hi guys!
We've made it back safely. Nice setup there.
Oh, we've got lights and everything now.
Oh, very fancy.
It's a bit of a rush. Since we do have a few questions, we'll just wait for Scott to get settled. Now apparently there were a couple of giraffes seen with Scott earlier, and Roberta, you were wondering how old giraffes get. Well, a giraffe can live for quite a long time. I've read somewhere that they can live up to 30 years in captivity, probably a little bit less in the wild. Obviously, there's much more out there to threaten them rather than those living in zoos. Yeah, up to 30 years old, I think, was one that lived in captivity, possibly even older. But generally, you'll see them living sort of between 20 to 25 years of age. I also had a really interesting thought about yesterday's sighting. So yesterday we had that elephant herd right near quarantine on the Sunset Safari, and we'd been with them for we've been with them for 4 drives in a row. That same elephant herd, really cute little baby. And yesterday was the first time, because we had them out in the open, it was the first time that I noticed the very large female without tusks. And she came up to us, she gave me the distinct impression that she wasn't really terribly comfortable with our presence in the situation we were in. And it was really interesting to see, just no stumps, nothing. But what I did notice, and I didn't get to remark upon it yesterday afternoon because we actually then got rained upon and had to close early. But what I did notice was as the herd was moving past us, she also had a daughter who was probably maybe sort of coming up to 15 years old, maybe a little bit older, but also completely tuskless. And that is something it clearly indicates that in this case it is genetic. It's been passed on in the same way that some human beings have brown hair and blonde hair. In this case, in that particular elephant herd, some of the individuals have tusks and some of them don't. And I'd love to look into the genetics of that, as to whether or not it's a recessive gene or how it works. But it is really interesting, and it was interesting to see. Hello, Scott.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's a little bit damp.
Where are we going?
Not very far. Not very far. So, we were busy talking about the tuskless elephant that I saw.
Okay.
The fact that she had a daughter as well that had no tusks. So it's really an interesting dynamic to see.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot more unsettled than the rest of the elephants. Oof.
And there are some parts of Africa, I've never actually been to anywhere, you get whole herds of elephants without tusks. So genetically over time, they have somehow obviously maybe lost their need for tusks, or maybe hunters many years ago shot out all the tusked elephants. That's very plausible, as the ivory trade was rife many years ago. But you do get areas where entire herds of elephants don't have tusks, so that must be interesting to see.
It would be very interesting. It's just interesting that it happened to make its way down to where we are here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever seen a tuskless elephant in the greater Kruger area, so it's really an interesting moment for me.
Good.
How was your morning?
It was great, and it looked like it was going to hold
I know,
for
it
quite
really
some time.
did.
And all of a sudden, as we found the giraffe, next thing we knew, we were in the soup.
Yeah, no.
And yourself, how far did you get?
We got down to Twin Dams. We got just to Chile Pan, and at that point, VM said to me, "You know, this is raining now. It's really raining. It's probably time to go." So we popped the rain jacket on the camera, and we sped away. Desperately, we had to power down and everything. It really hit us quite hard down there.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, something that happened yesterday that Jamie knows about and we've chatted about is interesting sighting with a female leopard called Shadow, who we were following hunting, and then all of a sudden her hunting kind of subsided, the impala moved off, but a hyena came onto the scene and came right up to her. And Teresa Bartman has seen the highlights channel and would like to know exactly what happened. So, like I've said, she had been hunting, and this hyena came onto the scene. It's not uncommon for hyena to follow the scent trail of leopards in the hope that when they get to the leopard, there will be a kill that the leopard's made and that the hyena can quite easily steal from the leopard. Even though if you put them in a ring together to have a fight, it would be quite an even battle, and depending on the individual hyena or leopard, either one could win. How it works out here in nature is that leopards don't take any chances with hyena. If it's one-on-one, or if it's usually more than one hyena and only one leopard, the leopard will run away, run up a tree, and avoid any injury and rather sacrifice its meal. But what was interesting yesterday is because there was no meat, the leopard kind of knew it was safe and just lay on the ground, didn't feel the need to run up a tree, and the hyena was at stages 5 or 6 meters away. And the most that Shadow did was snarl a little bit at the hyena, and once the hyena had made sure that there was no kill in the area, mainly using its nose, it was sniffing around very intently, it wandered off into the bush. So nothing too serious happened there, but had there have been meat, it would have been very different. On the same topic though, I mean, it was a couple of months ago that we got to see Quarantine male leopard, I think it was Quarantine, at Buffelshoek Dam, and he had made an Inyala kill that was too big for him to get up a tree, or maybe he just wasn't clever enough to. And a hyena came onto the scene. The leopard moved off the kill and lay about 3 meters away while the hyena fed. And interestingly enough, another hyena came onto the scene, and the current hyena that was busy feeding dragged the kill away from the incoming hyena, straight, almost a meter onto Quarantine. Quarantine had to kind of get out the way so he didn't get caught in the crossfire. So you do get these bizarre sightings with leopard and hyena, and I've even seen footage, I think it was from Botswana, of a hyena and a leopard co-feeding head to head on a carcass. So you never really can tell what is going to happen. It depends on the individuals.
Yeah.
But I hope that answers your question, Teresa, and keep some questions coming. We'll be here for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes answering your questions, and then depending on the weather, which I don't think is going to clear, we will probably call it a day and go and do some studying and edit some photos and try and make ourselves a little bit more knowledgeable for the future drives with you guys.
Now, just while we are on the subject of rain, and obviously there's a lot of viewers out there wondering how it is we can handle the rainy situations, which of course is coming. The rain is coming. And Roger from Wisconsin was wondering if we couldn't maybe get a canvas cover up on the car and head out that way with 2 presenters possibly together. Apparently it's something that used to happen. Obviously I arrived in the driest part of the season. And I mean, Scott, I'm sure you have stuff to say, but I'm assuming that it was obviously not working too well in terms of...
Yeah, the previous rain cover that was designed was done in a rush, and it didn't work as effectively as it could have. It took too long to deploy, and it wasn't the perfect canopy for the job. So we have designed one that we would like to get, but we are just in the process of waiting for it to be cleared. So we are trying our best from our side and are just waiting on the powers that be to give us the go-ahead for a canopy of some design to keep us out there, because of course Jamie and I would much prefer to be out there in the bush with you rather than sitting under a roof right here. So don't worry, we are trying our best to get that done, and hopefully sooner rather than later we will have some kind of a device that allows us to stay out there in the rainy weather.
We're definitely working on making a more permanent rain plan. Please excuse the sound of the pump coming through if you are hearing that. We are at DRC, so it's just pumping water to all the inhabitants that live in this camp. Now, I was talking a little bit about elephants earlier, and I just want to go back to that subject because we have a question from Jason in the UK. Now, Jason, you were wondering, because a quiet lion is a deadly lion, whether or not a silent elephant you can apply the same principles to. And the reason I think behind that question is we had two very different sightings that I handled in two very different ways yesterday. So the first one in the sunrise safari, a young bull full of testosterone. He was tussling with his older brother. He then came up towards us in a way that he was just trying to intimidate and throw his weight around. And at that age, that is what young bulls do. They try and work out exactly where their limits are and push the boundaries a little bit. And I immediately met that with quite a stern response. Nothing too serious, just told him, hey, back off a little bit, which he did immediately. Nothing serious at all. And then in the afternoon, that tuskless female that I was talking about, and I suspected she might, if not the matriarch, she's definitely very high up there in the rankings of those elephants. She's very, very big. She's quite an old elephant. And she came to give us a warning, but it was quite quiet. It was just ears open and staring us down. And it was quite a deliberate approach. It wasn't like she turned around and saw us suddenly and decided to come and have a look like the bull did. It was, she'd been watching us for a long time. She was pretending to feed. She slowly meandered closer, and then she very deliberately came and walked up to us just to have a look at what we were doing. Still not a threatening or a deadly situation at all. She was just warning us in her own way, but it's something that I handled very, very differently. I didn't shout at her in any way. We just sat calmly and just let her show us that that was the boundary and that was as close as we were going to get to the rest of her family, because it's coming from a protective instinct. It's not coming from any kind of need to prove themselves or push boundaries in any way. She was just giving us a message. But they always do say that if an elephant charges, ears out and screaming with trunk swinging, that's usually, not always, but usually not a serious charge. It's a warning charge. It means that the elephant probably isn't going to follow through. But if an elephant is completely silent, ears tucked away, trunk tucked up to the side or underneath, that is when you know you're in for some serious, in for a serious time, and that the elephant means business. And I've had it happen only once, where I've had a silent elephant charge. I was in the vehicle, it was at night. I didn't hear anything, it was completely dark, I didn't know the elephant was there. The only thing I heard were footsteps.
Oh, that must have been terrifying.
It was quite terrifying. I just felt, I don't know, instinct made me hear it. And we drove a little bit further forward. I'd pulled off the road for another vehicle that was passing me. I dropped my lights because it was a vehicle with guests. I turned off everything, and I must have pulled off straight into that elephant's personal space. Didn't know it was there. It was a pitch black night. And he objected to it in the strongest possible terms. That's the one and only time I've ever had that happen.
Yep, and like Jamie says, you do have to handle every situation differently, and a lot of that will come from experience with the individual animal that you are viewing and the body language of them. But it's a tricky thing to be sure of, and like we always try and stress to you, each animal is different, just like humans, so therefore you can expect to see different reactions from them when they are getting a little bit worked up.
Completely. Absolutely.
Still on the topic of elephants, Maggie is interested to know about what will happen with young bull elephants that are kicked out of their herd as they come of age. Somewhere between 10 and 15 years of age, they're likely to move off. And what happens if those same young bulls, 15 or 20 years later, come across their same natal herd? Will they know who they are, and would they potentially mate with them? And I think the answer to both of those questions is yes. I think they will there's a strong likelihood that they will know who the elephants are, who they grew up with. They've got incredible memories, and they do form very, very strong bonds with their mothers and other members of the herds for that first 10 to 15 years of their life. That being said, even though they may know one another, just like Junior, a lion, and his natal pride, the Nkuhuma lioness, he is already showing signs of wanting to try and mate with them. He's becoming sexually curious and inquisitive, and if he was allowed to stay with them, he would certainly mate with them. So animals don't understand that inbreeding is not a good thing, and if it does happen through default every now and then with elephants, it's probably not going to be the end of the world. And the fact that elephants don't have a territory or a home range means that they can disperse throughout the Kruger National Park and move in all different directions, and that means the likelihood of inbreeding is actually quite slim, simply because they wander around wherever they feel free to go.
And of course that breeding instinct is very, very strong for animals. They've evolved those natural dispersal methods in terms of trying to prevent inbreeding, but it does happen. It's bound to happen.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's an interesting one to just see the way that they come into conflict with each other, and it's a great way of having an older bull to calm down those hormones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite often in reserves where there have been elephants reintroduced, it's difficult to understand exactly why, but basically young bull elephants who don't have good mentorship from bigger older bulls are typically the ones that misbehave, cause a lot of trouble, even ram into vehicles, and quite often end up needing to be shot. So it's just a good example of how in a natural ecosystem nature takes place and everything takes care of itself, where as soon as you put wild animals into a wild space, but it's not an entirely perfect ecosystem, the balances don't work out and you end up getting problem animals. So interesting how the elephants do have their own kind of education system out here in the wild to teach young bulls to keep their place and not to get ahead of themselves.
It is very, very clever the way that elephants are so, and all the animals, but especially since we are talking about elephants, how adaptable they are to the circumstances around them. And we've seen that not just with the natural progression of things with the breeding, but also in situations like, for example, that female with the slightly shortened trunk. I know there's a few of them, but I'm thinking of one in particular. But then we also have a question from Mars in Arizona wondering about the tuskless female, and how it is that she might adapt her feeding techniques when she can't use her tusks. And I know that many of the regular viewers will definitely have seen, or if you have traveled to Africa, you almost are guaranteed to have seen an elephant using its tusks, either to dig, to use it to help snap a branch, or to help peel bark away from a tree. They do use them every day in terms of their feeding strategies. But that being said, they don't have to. So for that female, she was big, she was healthy looking, there was absolutely nothing wrong with her. I would say that she clearly reproduced by the fact that there was at least one other young tuskless female wandering around. So all she does is she just focuses on different feeding aspects, or she waits until another elephant has finished peeling away some bark, and then she can use her trunk. And you'll probably find her trunk is maybe slightly stronger than the others. She will have adapted perfectly to feeding strategies like that. And it's the same with the elephant with the shortened trunk. She doesn't have the same level of dexterity, but she doesn't look in any way unhealthy or like she's struggling. It just takes her a little bit longer to wrap her trunk around what she's trying to eat, to get it up, anything like that. It just takes that little extra bit of time and attention.
100%. I'm just going to jump out and have a quick scan around the area to see how we're looking weather-wise, but I feel like you said this morning before we headed out, even though it was clear temporarily, the weather over the last 24 hours, and it looks like it's going to continue, these waves of drizzle are coming through. So even though now we could head out just as we did this morning, after 10 minutes, and we've got our hopes up again, we're going to have to turn around and come home. So
let's have a look and see.
I fear that the only option is to call it a day, sadly, and try and make up for some extra safari action a little bit later on. But it really doesn't make sense, and again we are risking the very precious equipment that gets these broadcasts to you every time we head out without the necessary protection. So,
and I promise you we would far rather be out driving than sitting under a roof.
Yeah, and maybe what we can do is spend this time trying to resurrect the Flintstones type tarpaulin that we've tried to mesh together. We got it going the other day, and then it actually didn't end up raining when we went out on drive, but the tarpaulin was there working, but because it's a temporary fix, it has now fallen apart, and we need to kind of
rope it back together.
MacGyver style.
Bush mechanic style.
So I'm just peering over at it, and what I'll do is I'll show you the current state that it's in, or at least attempt to. It's flat on the ground, covered with rain, but this structure over here is kind of the remains of what we had worked on the other day to head out. And unless you were an absolute genius, you would not be able to make, with this equipment with just wood, a sustainable fix. But we just thought rather than nothing, we'd try and get that done the other day. But it's fallen apart a little bit. We should be able to resurrect it and at least get one vehicle out. So we're trying, but without the right equipment, it's never going to work out too well. So we'll see what we can do, and hopefully have some kind of a solution for you guys a little bit later on. Like Jamie says, we would much rather be out than sitting under this carport with all of you. So rather than keeping your time and not being out on safari with you, which is why we are here, not to sit under a roof debating what's going on, we need to be out there seeing it.
Yep, and just so that you know, don't not tune into the highlights reel just because we've been out for 10 minutes this morning. We will be playing some of the highlights from the week as well. So I think for now we're going to have to finish off, but we will say a big thank you to all of you for bearing with us in this rainy day.
Yep, and we will try and resurrect some form of waterproofing for the sunset safari, and see you all for that adventure. Hold thumbs, let's hope the weather clears, but until then, goodbye from us.
Bye everyone, have a wonderful day.
Thanks to the cameraman and to the directors Nikki and Jess in the final control room. Good luck, have a good day or night,
Bye.
and we will see you next time.